Hello and welcome to another edition of Believe in Biddeford. Biddeford is getting a lot of attention these days. Downtown is booming with new businesses and new housing and noticeable infrastructure improvements. Plans are underway to redevelop the former Merck site, and the media is taking notice with a lot of positive press. To discuss these changes and why this is Biddeford's time, I'm very pleased to have with me Mayor Alan Casavant and Matt Eddy, who is the Director of Planning and Development. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. Matt, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Mayor, I'd like to start with you. Last year you used the term Biddeford to describe some of the things that were going on in Biddeford these days. I wonder if you can expand on that a bit.
Of course, I grew up in Biddeford, so I remember its heyday back in the late 50s, early 60s, at least from my viewpoint. And I remember it being the center of York County, and I remember walking down the streets of Biddeford and all the stores were occupied and there were hundreds of people walking up and down the streets, and of course the mills were full of workers. So Biddeford was thriving. And then of course a number of things happened. The mall opened, the recession of the 1980s, the mills went south, and all of a sudden the tempo of Biddeford, the economic development of Biddeford started to slip. And with that slippage, I think, came a loss of community pride. People just despaired of what was happening. And all of a sudden, here we are today, and there's this resurgence of interest, resurgence of pride, and we're seeing all these new developments, new shops, new restaurants, and people really feel good about everything that's happening. So the term Biddeford, which is copied off Renaissance, it means rebirth. And I think this is a rebirth of Biddeford, shifting from the old stereotypical mill town into something more apt for the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. And what's wonderful about that is that the whole notion of the mill museums being a home and a development of innovation in its time in the 1840s and the 1880s and the 1950s and the Velux blankets. And now in this Biddeford, we have this growth and a whole bunch of new innovation.
So there's a bridge between the past and the present.
And it's all still happening in the mill. Yes. That's what's exciting.
That's what's exciting. So Matt, what are some of the other changes that are taking place? I mean, there's so many, we probably don't have time to list them all, but what are the big ones?
Well, I think the big ones are the actions that we've been having the council take to support us in moving forward with the Riverwalk project, moving forward with the redevelopment of the River Dam mill into housing and a restaurant and some commercial space. The decision to move forward on seeking and looking at a parking garage, no matter what that financial structure is. It's important that there's support for thinking about putting that parking garage in place. The agreement with Jim Brady and Brian Ing to go forward with that project. Every day you can see projects going on Main Street. Right now, on one side of Main Street between Adams and Elm is torn up, and they're busy putting together a new cement platform and really kind of laying that out. And folks will notice the new bump outs, an effort to make it safer to get across Main Street as traffic goes there. I think more than anything, when you go into the downtown right now, it doesn't really matter what time of day, it's busy. Mm-hmm. It's very, very busy.
Feet on the street.
Yeah, and you can say the same thing about the business parks. There's really no available spaces. There are a couple, but they're already spoken for or being sold or leased. Our businesses are thriving, they're busy, they're looking for workers. And so I think right now the activity across the board is really high.
Yeah. So to either of you, why are these changes taking place now? Why is this Biddeford's time? Was there a catalyst? Was there an impetus that really started things off in the last few years?
Yeah, I think there were a number of factors. I think having Maine Energy and its bad reputation, part of the community for so many years, it put Biddeford on a back burner in terms of economic development. I've talked to a number of entrepreneurs that have various businesses in other cities. I've been talking to them over the last 7 or 8 years to try to come here. and you'd be amazed about how many had never been to Biddeford before. And so when I mentioned that we had a university, that we had a coastline, and they were like shocked by that,
right.
because again, we were off the grid.
Right.
So I think the closure of the Maine energy plant was certainly a catalyst. The other thing that I think is happening is that the economic pressures in Southern Maine have had an impact, especially what's happened in Portland. That wave of Portland development has been moving throughout York and Cumberland counties, whether it's going to Westbrook or Saco or Biddeford and so forth. So we've been capturing some of that too.
Mm-hmm. So as prices rise in Portland, is that what you were referring to?
I think
Rental
that housing
rates?
and things of that nature are making people come to Biddeford as an option.
Yeah.
And then they're amazed by what they see, and they immediately begin to love it. Just to backtrack something else too, what Matt was saying, and trigger the thought, you know, one of the things that's been really amazing to me, and surprising in a way, was when the city council decided to invest in infrastructure improvements on Main Street. That triggered a huge amount of pride in community. Mm-hmm. So for example, on Facebook and social media, oftentimes people in the past, when they put down where they live, they put in the Portland area. You don't see that any longer. They're putting they live in Biddeford. And they're bragging about it.
They're proud to say they live in Biddeford, yes. Yes, there was a lot of good feedback, even on Facebook, when the plantings, the beautification went in 2 seasons ago. And I think that speaks to exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is it now that makes Biddeford this like desirable place to live and work? I mean, there's a quality that we have here now that may not have been 5 years ago, or there's an energy. Mm-hmm. I wonder if either of you can speak to that.
Certainly, you know, the redevelopment of the La Cava building down on Water in Maine. Great example, two young women, the ultimate professionals, millennials. They come with energy, they came with a vision, they came with an idea. We have a tremendous number of millennial investors mm-hmm. bringing what they've saved into the community, investing it. And they're not only investing their money, but they're investing their commitment mm-hmm. and their commitment to the community. And that commitment you can feel on the streets. And that's the infectious part that, you know, it's fun to go walking down Main Street. It's fun to go walking through the mills. It's fun to go walking through the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. You know, I dare say that the flavor and feeling of Bacon Street today is very different than it was 10 years ago, as little as 10. There's a wonderful feeling as, you know, as Mission Hill redevelopments, as the community gardens come in place. Right. And so it speaks to this investment of millennials. It speaks to this mixture of public and private space that's really beginning to play itself out in a way that I think people, again, are having a fair amount of pride in what's going on, and they're coming out on the streets.
And it sounds like we're beginning to row in the same direction, so to speak.
Exactly, and you know, I think the foundation of Biddeford as a community has always been its people. Mm-hmm. I was talking to one of my teaching buddies just the other day, and we were talking about how both of us lasted a long time in the Biddeford School Department because we really liked the kids. They were always mm-hmm. hard workers and very ethical and just great to be around. And that was always typical of the people, their parents too. So they were always hard workers. And so here today we have this blend of the foundation of Biddeford with the millennials and the people from away, whether they're from Brooklyn or from Portland or whatever it happens to be, that come here mm-hmm. because for them, the glass is half full mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. when they think of Biddeford mm-hmm. because of all the assets, whether it's architectural, whether it's educational, whether it's geographical in terms of beaches or parks, whatever it happens to be. If you want to live in Biddeford, there's some great things happening and great assets here, and people are beginning to recognize that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the other piece that, again, you think about the innovation ties, the other piece is the immigration ties, the immigrant populations that are coming into the community. You know, if you've gone on the Mill Museum tours, and if you haven't, you should, one of the things that you'll hear from many of the the tour providers is the discussion about the early immigrant groups, what roles they played. You know, we had those of the Islamic faith, you know, early on in the early part of last century.
Right.
We've had all these different immigrant groups play a different role, and now they're playing that role again. And it's very much the same. We have a shortage of workers. We need workers to come online. If we can figure out ways to close the language process, then we have, you know, a really, actually what we find is a very well-educated group that's willing and wanting to work. Mm-hmm. And that part of it, that mix in this community makes this community a lot of fun to be in.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if we could get a little more specific with a couple of projects. I know there's quite a bit of interest in the former Merck site and what's taking place there. The City Council has been discussing and planning and designing, having designed the parking garage. Could you give us some specifics about what that is, where it will be on the site, and really what advantage that has to the growth of Biddeford moving forward?
Which one would you like? I'll start. Well, in essence, if you look at 3 Lincoln, in general, the parking garage is going to go, and we're referring the Merck site as 3 Lincoln.
We are, yes.
And the middle of the site is about where the parking garage is, which creates pods on either side, and then an area for a park between the last pod and the river. Mm-hmm. That's a piece that we're going to be going out in some sort of planning charrette over the next few months to obtain input from the community on how they want that park to be developed, as it will abut directly onto the Riverwalk itself. The council has agreed to enter into an agreement with Jim Brady and Brian Eng and a company called Biddeford, and they will be conducting their own internal planning process to look at ways in which either side of those pods can be developed. We're talking to a number of different types of tenants, some local, some from away, all different kinds of activities. See in what way we can fill the buildings and at what speed. Mm-hmm. That will come back to City Council with a proposal that the community will be able to respond to. And if the community approves of that and the council approves of that, we'll enter into a contract and Brady Eng will go forward with development, theoretically at the same time that the parking garage is going up and being constructed.
Okay. Just for my own benefit, the parking garage will be theoretically located in the center of the site, mm-hmm. front to back, from halfway between Lincoln Street and the Stack.
Yep.
Is that right?
And between Pearl and the railroad tracks.
Yeah. And then on either side, on the back side of the garage and on the front side of the garage, development will take place.
That's correct.
Beyond the Stack, it will be parkland.
Right.
That will join the Riverwalk.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the Riverwalk, which is another big initiative the city is taking mm-hmm. on. Right now, it terminates at Laconia Plaza, which is adjacent to Building 15, Pepperell Mill Campus Building 15. Can you direct us from there?
Well, from that point, it would go upriver. It would go by the mills at Saco Falls, which is a residential development mm-hmm. that was developed by Zanton Company. It would then bend out and around the River Dam building. Part of the process with River Dam was for that part of the Riverwalk to work, a portion of the building needed to be demolished on the corner. It was a poor quality part of the structure. The developers looked at it, determined that that was a good thing for them to do, so we've partnered in putting together a plan to demolish the building and then build that Riverwalk in its place along the River Dam building up until you reach the 3 Lincoln Street site, or another way of looking at it is at the end of Pearl Street, abutting the river.
Okay.
And then that has the potential to go completely up the river, all the way up to the Eastern Trail, up near Cathedral Oaks. So So there's, you know, we talk about building from the core first, building in the core first and working out. As we work out, you know, these things will become much more apparent. And it will be a place to want to go visit.
And for any viewers who may not know all of the names of all the mill buildings, River Dam is where Deergo Brewing is located at the very end of Pearl Street, which is off of Lincoln Street. Another development that we'd all like to hear more about is Lincoln Mill.
Lincoln Mill will probably be pulling permits in the next few weeks. They're finalizing, the financing has been finalized, but putting the financing picture in line with the architectural plans, in line with how the internal part of the building is going to be used, the residential development, the commercial development, and then the hotel is all pieces that are being put into final form. And that we heard today, meeting with the developers themselves. So we expect that to begin pulling permits in the next few weeks.
Good, good. And then how long do you expect the construction process to take?
Well, they're pretty ambitious in their plans. The idea is to build those residential units, about 140 plus or minus, out within a year, and then follow that with the long stay hotel design, which is a series of small apartments, and the commercial space, including a fitness center, shortly thereafter. You know, they're already behind their own estimates because of things that you just run into when you are working on an old mill building and just trying to figure out the mechanics of the inside of the building. And so if they hit that year out piece, that'll be amazing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's tricky to redevelop a building because you don't know what you're going to run into till you get started. So it could be anything.
I mean, the advantage of, and most people don't realize, but the advantage of that building right now is that it's completely gutted on the inside. It's down to the windows and the brick walls, and the floors are stripped bare. So, you know, it's a matter of just going forward.
Right, right. None of this could happen without the approval and full support of the council, or at least support of the council. Mayor, I wonder if you could speak to any discussion that has taken place with regard to the garage or the Riverwalk or Lincoln Mill. Just the attitude of the council in general towards those.
Well, the council's been very cautious, and what's been clear right from the very start, it really hasn't been a black and white issue. It's been very complex. It's like playing a multi-dimensional chess game with moving pieces all the time. You know, there's still some controversy or conversation regarding the parking garage, for example, and what it was very clear to the council and to myself and staff is that no garage and nothing happens. In other words, whether it's the River Dam project or the 3 Lincoln site or whatever it happens to be, because there's not much space for parking, you gotta have a garage. And, you know, people will say, well, other people should pay for that. Well, no. You know, an economic wave is very narrow in terms of length. And I think the council's pretty clear that, you know, things have to happen now. If we wait too long, we're going to miss that wave and all of a sudden just tumble into the surf. So the council decided that they wanted to proceed. So they've approved the design plans, they've approved going out for permits and things of that nature. I mean, there's still more votes that have to be taken. But I can't overemphasize that in terms of economic development, and the paradigm shift in terms of what's happening from the old mill town to the new Biddeford, having a garage is absolutely essential. And no one else is going to pay for it. It's a investment by the city, sort of like the city did 50 years ago when they constructed the industrial parks and put in the sewer and the water and everything else that went along with it. You know, it was a private-public partnership. And this is just a modern version of that.
It's our role to as a community to provide the environment in which the private sector can flourish. And that's really what we're in the process of doing right now.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
And I think, you know, you got to remember that, and you know darn well in your position, but we compete with every other community in the state of Maine and New England and nationally. It's not like it used to be. And yet I can brag about all the assets that Biddeford has in terms of attracting business, but still there are certain things that have to be present. You know, sort of like when you're making a souffle or a meal, you got to have the ingredients. And the ingredients for economic development, at least the downtown area, is having that particular garage.
So we've talked a lot about downtown and the Mill District, or the downtown Mill District as we'd like to start referring to it. But that's not the only place that development is taking hold. Matthew, I understand that there is a big development taking place off of Barra Road on the other side of the Robert G. Dodge Industrial Park, and it's significant. I wonder if you could explain that to us.
It's a project being put forward by Mike Eon and David Gould with a company called Saxon. And it's an interesting approach. It's appealing to those that live in the medical field and work in the medical field. It is an apartment building of 200 plus units. And the leases are adjustable based on the time period that the medical person is committed, so that they can take a student from UNE who is going to do their residence at Southern Maine Medical, and they're only going to be there for 6 months, or they come in from another school, they're going to be there for 3 months. They can get a lease for 3 months while they're there, have a quality, quasi-furnished apartment building that meets all of their needs while they're there. It's a completely different vehicle. It's something we don't have. It's, as we call it, market rate. And we expect it to be very successful, but it'll be interesting to watch because we don't have anything quite like it in the community. In fact, in general, when you think about it, between that and the units that we know are going to be developed in the mill, I mean, we're talking about adding about 400 to 500 new living units in the community, new people to the community that'll be coming. And
those are largely market rate, is that correct?
Largely market rate in this, with Xanton being probably the last low moderate income projects that we've seen in the Mill District, this next series is all pretty much market. But I suspect that we'll also begin to see some other low mod income housing pieces coming on board relatively soon.
Well, good, because with the influx of that degree of market rate housing, I wonder if we have to be aware of the possibility of gentrification. That's a touchy word these days, but it may be happening here in Biddeford, and how are we managing it, or how are we approaching it so that it doesn't overtake the charm that Biddeford has now in the way that it has in other communities?
Well, the council's very aware of that. I think the idea of gentrification has evolved more quickly than we anticipated. It was probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago that general assistants, for example, began noticing that in terms of finding spaces for individuals who were seeking housing, it was becoming more difficult in the community because the prices were too high. Now, Biddeford has never, ever, ever had issues in terms of rental pricing, but now we're seeing that. The council has talked a number of times when we've been approving various projects that they want to make sure that there's workforce housing or something like that, so that individuals who are working can find adequate housing that works for them. So, I think the council and myself and staff are working towards trying to develop some sort of housing plan that'll work. Sometimes in the street people say, well, you should have, price controls or things of that nature. Well, that's getting really tricky too, because one of the things we're seeing is that people are buying apartment buildings and fixing them up. Buildings that needed some sort of renovation. And of course, they've incurred costs, and it's their right to try to recoup those costs through rents. The flip side of that is that Biddeford has been seeing has seen an increase in homelessness, and that's very troubling.
And teen homelessness in particular.
Yeah. But it's not the traditional. It's people who are working,
You know,
it's people
our
who are
own
educated.
people. It's our own people. It's Biddeford's population.
So we have to come up with a mechanism to deal with that also.
So, you know, following the lead of the mayor and city council, we had Maine Housing Authority down here about a month ago, and we went through a planning session in which we identified a number of goals and areas that we wanted to focus on that we could have some impact. You know, the low-income tax credit project is one, but we thought focusing in on existing owner-occupied 2 to 5 unit buildings and helping that population group rehab their units while also preserving so many units for low mod-income families. I guess the thing that came out of that meeting was our need to identify ways in which we can provide some intervention into the market to preserve units for a number of years.
So you're incenting business owners to maintain a certain stock of housing to ensure that everybody has a place to live.
And we're really, you know, we get it. I get it. I'm guilty of getting into the technical terms of 80% of median, and I know nobody really understands what I'm talking about when I do it. But we're trying to make it affordable for workforce folks in the future, and we're trying to at the same time provide assistance and incentive to the existing owners of our buildings, or where it's going to be a new building owner, you're providing incentives for them to consider that preservation. That's maybe the single most important thing we can do in the short term.
So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot we haven't touched on. But I wonder if you each can dig out your crystal ball out of your pockets, and what do you think that Biddeford will look like in 2 years or 5 years?
That's a tough one, because there was a report done, how many years ago that was completely wrong? 2 or 3?
Right.
I mean,
our population's going down, we're getting older, and it's exactly the opposite.
That crystal ball was cracked.
Yeah. I mean, so things that just happen so rapidly, but I suspect, I mean, if I was a betting man, which I'm not because I have no money, but if I was a betting man, I would suggest that Biddeford is going to continue to evolve, and that the mills and the downtown will be central to that particular development. I foresee Biddeford becoming more of a regional leader in terms of technology and creativity. And I see more individuals moving here because of all that we possess in terms of assets.
And if you were to think about the community as a place that you can work or drive to or move around, think about the core and the downtown and the Mill District, and it reaching out in spokes, and it being a relatively safe place for someone to move from one section to another, comfortably in a nice walk or on a bike or in a car, find a place to get out in the Mill District where Main Street facades and front spaces are full. We're kind of waiting to see in the day of the web what Main Street retail is going to look like. I'm not sure any of us are really sure, but we certainly expect more restaurants and more restaurant choices because we're already becoming very attractive given our base. I see Biddeford as a place that people really want to live, work, and play. And that's a special quality that every community should strive for.
So in the future, there'll be room enough in Biddeford for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good, good.
You know, you look around, I mean, just the press that we've been getting, you made mention of that earlier on, but in terms of the restaurants, for example, I mean, AAA Magazine, for example, did a story just recently, and they talked about the best restaurants and donut shops in Maine.
Donuts, I saw that.
And it was Riley's Bakery was one of them, and Elda. But we've seen other restaurants. Even today, I noticed some radio station did the best burgers in Maine, and the hamburger stand was referenced, as well as Five Guys up by Biddeford Crossing. So we have our restaurants that are getting plenty of press. We've got these shops that have been opening up, you know, that have been attracting individuals, so that you know, it used to be that people would go, we'll say, to Portland for entertainment and things of that nature. Now people from Portland are coming to Biddeford for entertainment because of the theater or whatever it happens to be.
And, I mean, and that, you know, that's a piece that we've left out in all this discussion. You know, we're embarking on a program to figure out how to expand the theater, you know, modernize it technologically, expand it so that it can become a 52 weeks year venue.
Because right now they are, how many weeks?
Probably about 16 or 17 in total.
Oh,
because
so less than half.
Less than half, because when they have a show, they've got to build and practice on the stage, and so the stage is out of play for 6 to 8 weeks, and that's, we can't be making any money during that period. So the idea is to rectify that, modernize the City Theater and City Hall together, and create that as an experiential venue that people will come to all the time. And I think that's the big change we expect to see on Main Street. It's not only restaurants, but things to do, the new escape room that's coming to Main Street. Experiences that people want to participate in. We'll see that kind of mix coming on. The theater is the biggest piece of all that.
Nice, nice. Well, there's a lot that has taken place over the last few years, and there's much more to come. So thank you for joining us today on Believe in Biddeford, and please stay tuned for another edition coming soon. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Matthew, thank you very much. And goodbye.